So I'm having a chat with Ollie of Stornoway. How are you?
Hey Jim, I'm doing really good. Thank you very much. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Thanks so much. Big news is you've got a new album on the way. But before we get to that, we've been playing a new single of yours, which is the title track of your record, Dig the Mountain. Tell us a little bit about the single, first of all.
Okay, Dig the Mountain has got a lot of brass and sax on it, which is always something that we've enjoyed doing. Right from the first single we ever uh, put out was Zorbing, and that has trumpet all over it. And we got to take the trumpet on the Jules Holland show and tour it all the way around the world. So brass is always something that we've celebrated, and it's really nice to have it all over this new album as well. So we've got that consistent sound. But the one thing I'd say about Dig the Mountain in particular as a single is it's produced really nicely. And the mixing engineer, Mike Lindsay, even though we've never met him in the flesh because of this remote working paradigm that we're now
Yeah.
in with the pandemic and everything, he did this incredible job. And it's a record that I can really be proud of when I listen back to.
Yeah, good. And that is off your new record, Dig the Mountain, which is out next week. What can people expect to hear when they get a chance to take a listen?
Well, I think personally, the flavor of lyric that I most treasure in Stornoway is lyrics that are about mental health and tuning out of one's own small world where we were all locked down for years in the pandemic and tuning into nature. So that is a theme that Stornoway's had right the way through from the early days with songs like We Are the Battery Human, which is very explicitly about that. But on this new record as well, it's got Trouble with the Green. This is a song about addiction and mental health issues and how you can use painting or artwork or just getting outside and looking into the sun as a way to heal yourself. And almost every song on the album has that flavor. More generally, there's a lot of nature on the album with some actual bird songs recorded and broadcast in between the lyrics and in between the songs. We've always been fond of ornithology because Brian, the
Mhm.
singer, is a qualified ornithologist, and he actually took a job as a nature reserve manager on a bird reserve during the pandemic. And then generally, a lot of wacky instrumentation and wacky um, mixing techniques from this very great talent, Mike Lilly, who I mentioned, has been working with us on it.
Yeah, good. And four records in now. How does this record sound in comparison to your previous?
I think it's the most polished sound that we've ever had because we have just matured in knowing what we want to hear. Uh, it with saying that it hasn't been a commercially or very extra professionally mixed or approached record. It's still very much homemade. We made it all in our home sort of sheds, or I recorded my parts in a small local music school here in South London, and then we sent everything into a professional studio to get mixed, but without wanting it to be too commercial. So I think it might, in fact, I know it is because a lot of people on the gigs thus far have come up to us afterwards and have said, "This is your least commercial album to date, and yet the most polished sounding." And that's exactly, I think, where bands want to be at a sort of middle stage in their careers. Polishing the sound and making it please the people who it's meant to please, but without wanting to please everybody and dilute the sound to be too commercial.
Yeah, good. And you broke up a few years ago. What brought you back?
Um, the way I see it, we were brought together by a very special evening event that happened at Christmas 2021. So 2 years into the pandemic, we found ourselves gathered for a Christmas party for a very old friend of the band's, and they made sure there was a guitar there for Brian to play. Brian got up and sang two songs, and part of the reason they'd brought us all into the same room together was to play some Stornoway music. So we did play for the first time in a long time, and the music was there in the fingertips. We didn't have to work too hard. The muscle memory looked after us. But those two first songs that Brian played on his own, they were a shock, a very pleasant shock to me because I saw these songs and realized, oh, Brian's been writing in the lockdown. This is fantastic. I've also been writing. We've all been doing creative things because that lockdown was, albeit a very terrifying and weird time for everybody, it was also a very creative time for a lot of folks. And when I saw that Brian had these two beautiful songs crafted, and those were Trouble with the Green and Excelsior, both from this new album, I saw it as something of a sign or like a message from the universe to say um, something new can be made of this whole lockdown situation. There's music to be made. There's something to be written about and sung about. Um, Stornoway is ready. It's had 5 years of hibernation by that point. What about we give it another go? So I put it all down to this one event that happened in late 2021. Although, if you ask the others, they'd probably say it's a sort of combination of lots of different factors, and most of them have to do with just meeting up and realizing that we really all love each other. We're great friends, and why not make music together as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And you've been able to play a number of shows. You've been doing some in stores recently, a couple of festivals too, and you get to play across the UK in October and November as well. I bet you can't wait to be on the road again.
Absolutely, yeah. 2 weeks of very hard touring. The difference this time is we are a very eco-conscious, climate-concerned band, and in fact, we made this new record out of recycled plastic. Almost all the vinyl that is available to buy is made out of recaptured, recycled plastic. Um, so the difference on the tour this time is we're going to be touring with recycled, sustainable merchandise for sale, and if all goes well, according to plan, we will be touring in an electric vehicle instead of the diesel default that bands have always had to use. And it was a great struggle to source these electric vehicles. I think they're going to have to end up being two large vans in order to replace the single large diesel tour bus that a band would typically take out. But it was months and months of calling around different hire shops, even just the manufacturers, different car makers saying, do you have anything that we can use? And we ultimately struck a deal whereby um, we are going to hopefully be able to write articles and write social media posts to let other bands and artists know that it is possible these days to tour electric. And partly in exchange for that exposure and spreading the good message, we were able to get a sort of subsidized, heavily discounted hire rate. And I think for the next couple of years, that's going to be the way it has to be. If you want to tour sustainably, you have to get thinking, get creative, get imaginative, and strike a deal. But hopefully, say 5 years from now, electric touring or some other way of doing it without pumping carbon dioxide into the air should become the norm for music, because music is such a brilliant bringer together of people, and it can be the catalyst for activism on the climate front. So it should also play by its own rule book and do everything it can to not pollute.
Yeah, absolutely. And along the similar note, are you hoping to take it overseas as well? And if you are you doing that sustainably too?
Very good question. We haven't really come up with a plan yet for that. But there's options like Greta Thunberg toured a few years ago by boat to get to her conferences. Took her a few extra weeks than would have if she'd flown. I hope she's still doing that because it set a really good example. And Brian's a very good sailor, so some of the songs on the album were written by him on a boat in a storm off the west of England, and it would be very in keeping with our brand. In fact, the name Stornoway comes from a trip years and years ago where he wanted to sail to the Outer Hebrides and didn't quite make it. And so Stornoway represents this destination that he's never quite reached. It's like a vision or a North Star or something that you never quite get to, but it's about the journey, not the destination. So, but in that climate sense, it's a great question because the whole carbon worry of any artist is about their journey and how to make that journey sustainable. So we do have some California scheming going on at the moment, and we've got like dates in the diary, penciled in the diary with America and Europe and elsewhere. But how to get there sustainably, yeah, that's an open-ended question for now.
Good. And bouncing off what you've just said, are you going to be playing your music in Stornoway at some point?
Yes, I really hope we get to return there. We previously have played there as part of the Hebridean Celt Festival, Hebcelt, and they seemed to enjoy it. And then we also played on the very night of signing our record deal back in 2010. It was the most magical experience, and we had a fantastic support act called Rachel Samani, who was playing with us on that night. So we all found ourselves in this magical, mystical place, actually the grounds of the castle in Lewis, which is where the Wicker Man was partially filmed. So it's got a lot of like significance for us in like a folklore storytelling sense. And if we can get back to any part of Stornoway and maybe visit the beach again as well. Maybe it means cycling from Oxford, where we're based, as far as we can get before our legs give way. Then catching a train, maybe the sleeper train up to Aviemore. I've heard that's good. Then cycle up to Ullapool, might only be a few tens of miles. Then the ferry, and then cycle on the other side, borrowing some guitars locally. That could be the way to do it without putting out any, plane fumes or car fumes. But it's going to take a lot of planning.
Yeah, absolutely. Ollie, it's been great having a chat with you.
You too, Jim. Thanks so much. And yeah, hope you enjoy the album. See you on
Thanks so
tour.
much.